This is, in fact, the official Centaurworld stream. We are going to be talking about the Netflix show Centaurworld today, and it's going to be interesting. Now Purple is here. Look at that. The gang's all here. But yeah, we're going to talk about Centaurworld, and I'm actually kind of excited about it because I see this stream as an opportunity to elaborate on some of the things that I said about the show in my impressions video that I released, what was that, Saturday? Something like that? Sorry for the helicopter outside. That's fun, right? It gives it some flavor. Oh wow, that helicopter's really, yeah. Purple watched no episodes of the show. So Purple, this is going to be interesting for you. This is going to be quite the journey, I think. Yeah, so I finished it. I finished the first season yesterday. I watched the first 3 episodes or so. I made that quick impressions video, and then it wasn't until yesterday that I went back and I finished the season. Wow, I'm really sorry about the helicopter stuff. It's pretty darn loud. So I'd like to get into more detail, like I said, of my feelings about the show. I'm not really going to spoil plot points. I can do this right here. Here is my review or impressions video of Centaurworld. That's just going to play on a loop in the corner. I can at least do that. And just to sum up the impressions video, like I wasn't crazy about it. There was a lot of stuff about the show that I liked. There was some stuff in terms of the team working on the show behind the scenes that seemed really positive, and I'm glad that the show got made overall. That's one big thing I can say right off the bat. I'm glad that the show got made, and there's a decent amount of stuff in the show itself that I really enjoy. Sometimes some little jokes and bits here and there can be a lot of fun. Obviously, the number one thing for me in terms of watching the show and enjoying the show is the songs, and I have illustrated this point in this beautiful comic that I'm moving the wrong thing in the background. In this beautiful comic I made here. Comic? I don't know. It's almost an infographic. It could definitely be in a textbook, just saying. This kind of summarizes the stuff I was saying in the impressions video. There's a lot of positive stuff about the show. It's bright and colorful. It's kind of weird, but in a very accessible internet animation kind of way. It's definitely not weird, to the standards of someone who watches some more experimental stuff or art housey stuff in general, animation or otherwise. But the sort of saving grace for me when watching the first, 3 or 4 episodes, the songs are pretty darn good. And not every song works for me on the soundtrack. I have been going through the soundtrack on Spotify, which maybe I'll pull up later just to take a look. But not every single song is one that I want to listen to over and over again. Not every single one feels really well crafted in its genre and everything like that. But overall, the really kind of classical musical theater songs hit pretty hard. They're catchy. I like re-listening. I like listening to them a lot. Miss Butter says that the biceps for songs aren't big enough. Yeah, it's funny. When I distorted the one on the right, it ended up making the forearm a lot bigger. Maybe that's somehow more appropriate. It almost looks like a fish of its own, that right arm, doesn't it? It kind of took on a special life of its own there. The dialogue, I hated the general writing for the, getting through each episode's story and character dialogue and setting up the world. None of that really worked well for me at all. I don't think it worked all that well. And in fact, a lot of the dialogue stuff and just the way that they try to get characters to interact with each other and get them to go from one place to another or set up a priority for the characters to pay attention to, I thought was extremely clunky. I didn't really like it. So one of the biggest, like, I'm not going to say that I'm making a correction to the impressions video, but I do want to say that I got an extra bit of information when I was finishing up the first season that really changed my perspective, I guess, in terms of how I viewed the show and how I spoke about it critically. And we can argue about whether or not this is like a valid reason to criticize the show differently. But here, let me pop up this beautiful piece of information. I can simulate it here. Bam. This is something that I only noticed, I don't know when it was. It was like maybe the next to last episode. I was like, you know what? I'm curious now. What is the rating on this show? And is it meant for small children? Because I think that's another thing I tried to articulate in my impressions video was like, I honestly wasn't sure whether or not it was meant for young children to watch. The marketing never really made me feel like it was for just kids. It felt like, at best, a show that, I've talked about this before, adult-friendly animation, something like Adventure Time or Steven Universe or Summer Camp Island, something that works really well for both young viewers under the age of like 15 and adult viewers who are any age above that. And I don't really get that sense from the Centaurworld. I don't really get the feeling that it does both. And people are more than free to disagree with me on that point. But I feel like it ends up being much more of a kid's show than anything else. And there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. And there are also a lot of like media critics and talking heads out there who will say, hey, look, we shouldn't judge, we shouldn't go lighter on, we shouldn't go easier on children's entertainment just because it's meant for children. Like, that's not an excuse to create something bad or cheap or lazy. Like, kids deserve quality entertainment, even if it doesn't contain all the crazy content that's really only suitable for adults. But here, knowing that it was sort of aimed at a younger audience, at least as far as I can tell, it changed my perspective on the show. And I immediately felt kind of bad for going into sort of harsh detail or very critical thoughts about how the dialogue is so bad and blah, 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 and that it didn't quite work for me, because I was definitely judging it on the standard of, oh, this is a show for people around my age, or like 20-somethings or late teens, stuff like that. But here, I don't know. Knowing that it was rated for such young children, I'm kind of okay with all of that. I'm kind of giving it a pass on some of the elements that I didn't like as much. I probably shouldn't, but I am. And ultimately, that makes me even more likely to recommend it to people who are in their late teens or 20-something people, because go ahead and watch it, but please keep in mind that, yeah, it's maybe one of those things where it's not exactly for you. It's not exactly going to connect with you in the same way that like the last few seasons of Adventure Time did, or the really serious Steven Universe stuff that delves into some really heavy topics. This is not that, even though there are times where it sort of kind of messes around with like ideas surrounding mental illness, and there's even technically a suicide in the show, kind of. In a lighter way, we could just qualify that as like an instance of giving up. One character just decides to give up. But in terms of analogy or metaphor, more accurately, it sort of reads as suicide, which was kind of strange to me, because that's not a topic you just dip your toe into and then run away. But that's kind of what I felt of how the show handled it. Giving up, yeah, or like, there are instances of that kind of theme in other animated stuff, especially from the 80s and 90s, right? What's that? Isn't there that very famous song from the Little Toaster movie, where I forget which character, maybe the vacuum cleaner guy, just talks about how miserable he is all the time or something like that. Yes, Neverending Story has a scene like that as well. What are some other examples? This is a nice participatory section. Can anybody else think of examples from basically any animated show or movie from any time period that that kind of goes to that place of like, oh, it kind of feels like they're talking about suicide, but not really? Oh, I can think of another one. In the movie adaptation, the animated movie adaptation of The Phantom Tollbooth, there's an early scene set in the doldrums, right? Where the characters, it's not exactly so much suicide, it's just like boredom and mental stagnation, but they get stuck in the doldrums and they can't get out of there until they have like motivation and active thought, right? But if you guys can think of other examples, please yell them out, because that would actually be interesting to sort of connect the dots to other, and not even just animation stuff, but animated, not animated, gosh, children's entertainment in general, right? So please let me know if you can think of anything along those lines. So this is my my guess at what the Centaurworld sort of mood board or vision board looks like. Before I get to that, I will say that one of the comments I got on the video, and I'll say for you guys too, who are already in the chat, Infinity Train got canceled. Oh, well, never mind. I guess that one's dead. But getting back to Centaurworld, I wanted to say that one of the most interesting comments I got on my impressions video was someone talking about how one of the reasons that they really seemed to like the show was that it reminded them of like tabletop RPG stuff that they've been doing with their friends. So I assume something akin to Dungeons and Dragons, if not exactly Dungeons and Dragons. So I think that was a really interesting point to bring up, because I do see how like all those tiny little bits that the show has between different characters and really one-off jokes and things like that, and the sort of ambling direction that the characters take on the way to their goal. Yeah, in a weird way that aligns with, a role-playing game, an in-person role-playing game, right? And that was pretty good. I think that was a good connection to make. At the same time, I think it's another good way to articulate why some of the comedic stuff in the show doesn't necessarily work for me, because like in a tabletop RPG kind of thing, if you were there when a joke started up, like if you're in on the joke, some stupid joke that, turns into a running joke after a while, it's a lot of fun. But outside of that, if you weren't there for it, if you're not in on the joke, it's just kind of it's a slog, and you just have to sit there and sort of catch up and feel like you're, oh yeah, no, okay, it seems funny. I thought that was an interesting point. And yeah, also in that impressions video, I thought it was funny, Hugo, when I saw your comment pop up, like I got a notification for your comment on the video, and I could just see that it was pretty long. So right away, I was worried that you really loved Centaurworld, and that you were gonna go off on me for being like, hey, how could you not like the show? But no, that's not what you were saying at all. But that was like my first impression. I was like, oh no, I hope I didn't make everybody angry. All right, folks, here I'll pop up on the screen for you the current like-dislike ratio on my Centaurworld impressions video. Yes. So here it is. Here's the like dislike ratio on that video. And overall, like it's not the worst one. You know, it's not. No one's coming after me with pitchforks or anything like that. But at the same time, that is, I think that's one of my worst, probably one of my worst ratios in any of my videos. Some of my other least popular videos in terms of likes and dislikes are my impressions video of The Midnight Gospel on Netflix. What was another one? My full review of The Midnight Gospel on Netflix. People really didn't seem to like those ones. And I'm sure there are other ones too. Another really, really unpopular one was my review of The Mitchells versus the Machines, another Netflix property. That one's at like, the likes are like 66%, I think. So it's actually higher. It's higher than this one. Oh, I think that's kind of funny. Is there anything else I can say about Centaurworld while we're still on the topic? Well, I'm still kind of slightly fired up about it. Well, I was gonna suggest that we could try to like predict some of what they're gonna do in season 2. I assume the show's gonna get renewed. I know it's very early days, but I have a feeling they want to keep it going at least for 2 seasons. However, I feel like if we predicted the new season, we would inevitably be getting into spoilers, and then poor Purple here would have the whole show spoiled. Whoever the like giraffe centaur was like the most forgettable character to me. And for some reason, they decided that the voice acting style for that one would just be like insane person. Titus Burgess could be a fun addition. That's actually really good. That's a pretty good pick, Miss Butters, because he can sing, right? Like that's a pretty big thing for him and his brand, right? Is that he can sing. Actually, you know, it could be fun, and I'll see whether I get a copyright strike for it. Is everybody ready? Don't trust me on this, but I'm gonna ask all of you folks here. Please pay attention. I'm going to play like a 10-second clip from one of these songs, and you tell me whether all of the voices sound like they're in key and hitting the right pitches. And I knew that you were searching. Oh, it's right here. Okay. Everybody listening? I'll give you a second. I found it after playing the entire song on stream, where I'm not allowed to do that. I found the spot. Now listen very closely to the high part. Listen to the high part and let me know if it sounds like it's on pitch. Okay? Nice and loud here. Here we go. I'll even mute my audio for a second. And I knew that you were searching for me. Did you catch it? Did you catch it? Here, we'll try one more time here. And I knew that you were searching for me. There it is. It's right there. It's right there. Okay, so again, not a vocal coach or anything like that, not a professional musician. But to me, whoever's hitting that high part right there, it sounds sharp as hell. It sounds painfully sharp. Here, one more time. And I knew that you were searching for me. Ooh. But I just wanted to mention that. I don't know if I'm right, but I just get that feeling from it. And be there, oh yeah, no, they're like a million. I'm not trying to like I'm not trying to be like mean or call out like a mistake. Because yeah, as is so often the case with production, and especially production that's on like a really tight deadline, or if specific performers don't have as much time to prepare and to record as they would like, there are a million reasons why there can be like the tiniest mistakes in dialogue, or if you've ever seen those like accent critique videos on YouTube from Wired, if there's anybody who's doing like a quote unquote bad job, it's really just that there wasn't enough time, they didn't have enough training in the area, things like that. So it's I don't mean to I don't mean to drag anybody through the mud or to be like, hey, look, everyone laugh at how there's this little mistake in the song. If anything, it's incredibly impressive that basically every note and every song and every vocal part is extremely solid. Like, especially if we go back to the ones that I've really been going back to again and again. Stuff like Fragile Things, especially, and What If I Forget Your Face? Like, woof. Talk about just, ooh, there's something so classic about it that's just hit so hard. This is beautiful. Oh, I'm so proud of the visual on this stream. We talked about how it does seem like it's a show meant for younger kids, or at least, also for younger kids, in addition to other stuff. But then if we compare something like Centaurworld to some of the other contemporary animated shows that seem to be aimed at primarily a younger audience, anywhere from under 10 to tweens and early adolescents, then even in that context, Centaurworld is bumping up against some pretty substantial competition. And the specific example that that came to mind for me when I started to make that comparison is some of the recent DreamWorks television shows. A lot of them are in streaming, but you get the idea. Just their series that would work on television. And if we can compare Centaurworld to some of those, specifically like She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, or one that I only watched recently, thanks to Miss Butters, actually, by the way. Well, she recommended both of these. It just took me a really long time to get around to them. But She-Ra and Kipo and Age of Wonder Beasts, or whatever the heck it's called. Both of those shows are like basically modern classics. Those are basically shows that I feel like are really going to stick around. Even, they both ended, of course, but in terms of people really loving them and remembering them and wanting to go back to them years later, I feel like those are really going to stick around, and I feel like those are incredibly well crafted. And I don't quite get the same feeling from Centaurworld personally. Again, that's just me and how I respond to the show. But if those all fall into relatively the same category of children's animation, it's really stiff competition, I guess is what I'm saying.